Welcome to our YouTube channel. Today, we bring you a story full of surprises and hidden angles that few people know about. Don't leave just yet. Just when you think you've figured it all out, there are fascinating and meaningful details waiting for you at the end of the video. Let's explore together and uncover the special message this video has for you. Are you ready? Let's get started. There was a certain tension, an undeniable spark between them, and I believe it played a role in bringing out their best. Describing their relationship is difficult. It was never a case of George Martin did everything or the Beatles did everything. The truth lay somewhere in between. George contributed in his way, but the Beatles, for all their brilliance and charisma, were never going to be model employees. While they revolutionized music and culture, they also tore up the traditional rulebook on how a band should behave. They constantly toyed with expectations, whether from their devoted fans or the record executives scrambling to keep up with their meteoric rise. One of those caught in their orbit was George Martin, the classically trained producer who transformed their raw talent into a musical revolution. When he first heard their demo, he was unimpressed. It was terrible, awful, he later recalled. Yet, something about it intrigued him. I told Brian, I can't judge them based on this. If you want me to take a serious look, bring them in. I need to see them in person. By all accounts, Martin was patient, professional, and unshakably composed, a quintessential English gentleman. Yet even he couldn't remain unaffected by the Beatles' relentless mischief. At one point, exasperated but amused, he remarked, "You are bastards, aren't you?" It was one of the rare moments when they truly tested his limits. Yet, in its absurdity, it captured something fundamental about their dynamic. During one recording session, Martin listened to a track and made a quick assessment. It just needs a bit of patching on the vocals. We'll double-track a few sections. By 3 p.m., the band had finished their part. Now I'll write a small score, add a string quartet and some woodwinds, mix it, and send it back. This meticulous approach was part of what made him indispensable to their success. The scene in question took place in early 1964, at the peak of Beatlemania. The Beatles were in Paris, performing a series of sold-out concerts at the Olympia Theatre, a venue more accustomed to hosting legends like Edith Piaf than four shaggy-haired Liverpudlians. The French audience had initially been indifferent to the band's charm. Their early records were met with shrugs, and the local press seemed perplexed by the global hysteria they inspired. Yet, by then, their fame had already swept across Europe like wildfire. They had just achieved their first U.S. #1 hit with I Want to Hold Your Hand, and the world was waking up to the fact that this was no ordinary pop act. This was something seismic. But just as they were breaking into the American market, EMI executives had their sights set elsewhere, Germany. Despite their massive success, the label feared the language barrier might limit their reach in non-English-speaking countries. It was common industry practice at the time for artists to record versions of their hits in French, Italian, or Spanish to cater to local audiences. The logic was simple. If you wanted Germans to buy your records, you had to sing in German. EMI's German subsidiary, Odeon Records, insisted that the Beatles do just that. The plan was to record I Want to Hold Your Hand and She Loves You with German lyrics, under the guidance of a translator. George Martin, always the diplomat, relayed the request to the band. Their reaction? Laughter. "That's absolute rubbish," Martin recalled them saying. And really, who could blame them? To a band that had spent years perfecting their craft in Hamburg's clubs, singing in German felt like an unnecessary regression. Yet, Martin, caught between the band and the label, knew he had to convince them. "If we want to sell records in Germany, this is what we have to do," he told them. Reluctantly, they agreed, and a session was scheduled at EMI's Marconi Studios in Paris. Otto Demmler, a German record executive, brought in Camillo Felgen, a lyricist and translator, to assist. It was meant to be a quick and efficient process. 2 songs, a few hours in the studio, and it would be done. What could possibly go wrong?
Everything. On the day of the session, the Beatles simply didn't show up. Martin, Demmler, and Felgen waited at the studio, growing increasingly frustrated as the hours passed. Eventually, Martin called the band's hotel, where he reached Neil Aspinall, their road manager. Sounding apologetic, Aspinall relayed the message. "I'm sorry. They're not coming. They asked me to tell you." Martin was incredulous. "You mean to tell me they're telling you to tell me? They're not telling me themselves?" Aspinall confirmed it. Most producers might have given up in frustration, but George Martin was not most producers. And the Beatles, beaming with mischief, knew it. George Martin knew exactly what they were up to. The Beatles would giggle mischievously, but to their credit, they never let their antics interfere with serious work. Their pranks were reserved for the end of a session, a way to unwind. At that time, at least, their mischief was harmless. Furious, but determined, Martin stormed off to the George V Hotel, dragging Otto Demmler and Camillo Felgen along with him. If the Beatles thought they could avoid their German-language recording session with a bit of cheeky delegation, they were sorely mistaken. Expecting to find the band reveling in rock and roll excess, the biggest band in the world after all, holed up in one of Paris's most opulent hotels, Martin braced himself for chaos. Smashed furniture, groupies, perhaps even the odd illicit substance. Instead, he walked in on something far more surreal. The Beatles were having tea. Not a euphemism for a wild party. Actual tea with cups, saucers, and biscuits. At the center of it all sat Jane Asher, Paul McCartney's girlfriend at the time, pouring tea with the serene elegance of a Victorian governess. "It calms you down," someone muttered. "Life out there is so different. It'll be easier to tell what it does now that we're back, doing ordinary things." The moment Martin entered, the scene erupted into farce. The Beatles scattered in all directions, diving behind couches and chairs, one of them even sticking a lampshade over his head. They were like schoolboys caught in the act, trying to diffuse the tension with their signature charm. From behind their hiding places, they chorused in unison. "Sorry, George. Sorry, George." Martin, barely restraining his irritation, sighed. "You are bastards, aren't you?" he said, half laughing, half exasperated. Then, regaining his composure, he gestured toward Demmler. "Are you going to apologize to Otto?" Sensing that the joke had run its course, the Beatles emerged from their hiding spots, offering a chorus of sheepish apologies. "Sorry, Otto. Sorry, Otto." Despite the absurd detour, Martin managed to corral them into the studio, where they finally recorded the German versions of their songs. Come, Gib mir deine Hand was completed by overdubbing new vocals onto the original instrumental track of I Want to Hold Your Hand, while Sie liebt dich required a full re-recording, as the original 2-track recording of She Loves You had been erased. The session, despite its rocky start, was a success, and the songs were soon released in Germany. In hindsight, the entire exercise was a pointless charade. The English versions performed just as well in Germany as anywhere else, proving that the Beatles' appeal transcended language barriers. For the band, the experience was little more than an amusing footnote in their career, one of the many absurdities they encountered on their road to global domination. For George Martin, however, it was a rare moment of genuine frustration in what was otherwise a remarkably harmonious partnership. As the man who had guided the Beatles from scrappy beginnings to the pinnacle of pop music, Martin understood better than anyone the delicate balance between their creative genius and their irrepressible mischief. They were, after all, very charming people, he later admitted. And in the end, who could stay mad at the Beatles? Even when, as he so memorably put it, they were absolute bastards. Yet, this story isn't just about tea parties and lampshades, it's a glimpse into a unique dynamic, one that defined not only their relationship with Martin, but also their entire approach to their career. The Beatles never played by the rules, whether those rules were set by record labels, producers, or even societal norms. They pushed boundaries, defied expectations, and occasionally tested the patience of those around them, but always with a disarming charm that made it impossible to hold a grudge. What's remarkable is how this dynamic endured over the years. Martin, for all his frustration that day in Paris, remained their trusted collaborator, guiding them through their most ambitious projects and shaping the sound that would define a generation. And the Beatles, for all their irreverence, never lost their respect for the man who had believed in them when few others did. In the end, the tea party at the George Vythe Hotel is more than just a humorous anecdote. It's a testament to the extraordinary bond between a group of young musicians and the producer who helped them achieve greatness. It's a reminder that even the most legendary figures in music history were, at their core, human, flawed, mischievous, occasionally infuriating, but always undeniably brilliant. Thank you for taking the time to watch today's video. If you found this story interesting and meaningful, don't forget to hit like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any exciting content coming up. Leave a comment to share your thoughts. We're eager to hear from you. See you in the upcoming videos with more unique and meaningful stories. Stay with us.